So last week I spoke about a guitar that was really great to play, but I just don't have any connection with it. But in this video, I'm talking about a guitar that's not so easy to play, but it's one that I just can't put down. Hello viewer, my name's Stu, and if you're new to the channel, I do recommend that you take a look at my channel playlists, which cover my return back to playing and recording guitar. Always a big thank you to those who subscribe, like, share and comment below. Many thanks. Remember, it's always good to hear another constructive viewpoint, so do message below. So in the previous video, I gave a short overview of my PRS S2 McCarty 594 double cut, and I explained that while it's a very nice guitar to play, very stable, and the reason I bought it, very good for my recording studio work. It's also the last guitar that I would pick up to jam with, because for me, emotionally, there's just something missing. Do check that video out if you haven't seen it. Now this time round, I have here in this box something rather special. Of course you can see the brand name here. We'll look at what's inside though in a moment. But inside this box is something that certainly does connect with me on what you could call an emotional level. The PRS McCarty, well, I just don't think it ever could. But before we have a look at this and what's inside the box, a short story, because this particular guitar has a special place in my heart. At the beginning of the 1980s, as a semi-pro musician, my trusted guitar for a number of years finally gave up on me. The fact that it got a lot of abuse probably had something to do with that. But I just actually couldn't afford to replace the guitar at that point in time. And the band had quite a lot of gigs coming up. So, reason for that, all my wages were being eaten up with finance payments on the main part of our band's PA system. So, long story, how I ended up paying for that and paying it off. So, pretty much in a bit of a quandary with no guitar. Unknown to me, my mother found out about my dilemma, and she called me up and she wanted me to go and visit her. And so I entered the house and she told me there was a box in the living room that had just been delivered and it was for me. On opening the box, inside was a guitar and a brand I had never heard of before. It was called a Westbury Standard, and that was originally produced in Japan, and in fact not that many were actually made of that particular brand. Now my mother bought this from a catalogue, not knowing a thing about guitars, and while that particular brand would be generally considered a fairly budget guitar, it was certainly not inexpensive, but it came complete with DiMarzio pickups, and it played great, and it sounded really nice through my Marshall stack at that time. Now I mentioned in my last video, sadly it got stolen, and it was indeed returned to me a year later, but it suffered a lot of damage, and I think the guitar, it must have been kept in a very unfavourable environmental condition, as the neck had a bad twist in it. Over 40 years later, sadly with my very elderly mother, now very ill, she was so pleased to hear I was playing the guitar once again and wanted to buy me something in the musical line again, and something that would have a place in my heart in memory of her. So I thought, long and hard about this, and for me, there was only one guitar type that would be a fitting memory. The doorbell rang, and I was soon pulling out a very nice cream-coloured vintage-style case from the cardboard box. And on opening this case, I sat and, I just looked for a few moments at this beautiful reproduction 1950s era Custom Shop Fender. Before I comment on the actual experience of playing the guitar, which is without doubt an acquired taste, and more of that in a minute, let's take a quick dive into what this particular guitar is. So it's one of Fender's reissue style guitars from the 2022 series, and as you can see, it's relict, a finish that has its fans and its detractors, and for an old guy like me who remembers the early days of Stratocasters, it just simply makes me smile. It's listed as a limited run 1950s Stratocaster relic in a chocolate two-tone wide fade sunburst over an alder body, which, while it's based on the 1956 model, it has actually been given the body contours of the 1957 model. You can see how the custom shop department have worn away the lacquer on various areas of the body, which includes lacquer checking. That's, if you will, is like a cracking effect that comes with environmental changes that happen to lacquers. Here you can see the worn area on the back of the neck. This makes it really nice to play, actually. The worn areas in between the frets on the maple fretboard, and the tarnishing of the hardware, such as the tuning keys, and here you can see on the tremolo block. And in general, all the plastic parts are slightly discoloured to give that overall look of aging. The pickups are fat 50s, they are hand wound and have a very definite tone, while the selector switch is the 5-way blade type, which was introduced in the late 1970s, because normally it would have been the 3-blade. Now, I personally really appreciate the 5-blade because it does give you more tonal selection. The tremolo block is of a vintage style, and I have to say it's not the best for staying in tune if you were to use the trem vigorously, and on this guitar I don't, so that's okay with me. The pickguard again is from a later 1960 model with 11 screw fixings. Now, once again, I prefer this modification as the early single-ply pickguards, due to the materials that they were made of, and they had less fixing screws, they would often cause the pickguard to buckle or contract, thereby fracturing in places. The neck is, I wouldn't say it's chunky, but it certainly does fill your hand nicely, and it is modelled on the 1954 Soft V, and the fretboard is, as you can see, maple rift sawn. And here, looking at the frets, there are 21 of them. Now, this is where I make the statement that for some, this guitar is maybe not that comfortable to play. The fret wire is Jumbo 6100, and while they are really nicely finished, you can really feel the difference coming from most other guitars. And if you're a Super Strat style Ibanez player, then this would probably be quite a shock to the system. Some folks love the jumbo frets, but I would say that they are an acquired taste. It sports a bone nut, the tuning keys are of the vintage style, and along with the tremolo, the guitar does need more care when it comes to keeping it in tune compared to my later version Stratocasters, which I have absolutely no problem with. Now, the case it comes in is manufactured by the American case company G&G, and the outer covering in this example is a cream-coloured textured vinyl, and it has a leather-stitched binding at the ends, and it's just a very nice looking case. Inside, it has an attractive deep red crushed velvet interior with a good sized pocket for all the knickknacks. Again, it's a very well made case. Now, I should say, unless you go into the music store to purchase a custom shop guitar where you can have a discussion about the case that they might give you, unless specifically stated on an online sale, there's actually no guarantee what type of colour of case or even the type of case you might get sent. So If that's important to you, and especially if you're buying online, you'll want to bring that up in conversation. And you know what? It's always best to get things like that in writing. It just saves a lot of hassle should things not work out the way you would like them to. So the guitar itself. Will I be using it in my general music recording within the type of compositions that I'm writing? Unlikely. Yes, perhaps on occasion, but certainly not anywhere near the top of the list for guitars that I'll be using in recording. Now, why is that? Well, that's because this has a tone all its own. Yes, you can model the tone of just about any guitar, especially in a recording environment, but this type of guitar for me has it's got a very different place in my heart, and that's very true of when it comes to playing and recording. If I'm playing along to some blues backing tracks in the studio or perhaps jamming with a friend, then this is definitely one of the guitars that I will pick up first because it just has so much character. And I spoke about that on the previous video whereby for me, my PRS S2 McCarty 594, a great guitar in the studio, but just lacking that character that I'm speaking of. So how does it feel to play? Without doubt, it's a guitar that would not be for everyone, but for me, it feels great. It does take a few moments to get to grips with it, particularly if I come from playing another more modern style guitar, but it just has such character, and as such, it's a guitar that you need to feel a bond with, which again in turn has an influence on how I end up playing. The hand-wound Fat 50 pickups in this model, because you do get different windings depending on the year, they are a little thinner sounding than Fat 60s or Texas Specials or more modern Strat variants. So I find I do tend to give the guitar a bit of a boost via amplifier settings and or pedals to just get to that place where it sounds a little fuller sounding. And again, it's all down to personal taste, but that's what I like to do with this guitar. And for me, you know, that's all part of the fun, part of the nostalgia, part of the character of the era that this guitar belongs to. As I grew up in the 1960s, the Fender Stratocaster was the iconic guitar that I fell in love with, so to speak. And owning a Strat from the 50s and 60s would be a natural choice for me, albeit a reissue, because I have no interest in owning an actual original from those years. And that's because I would say, number one, they are very expensive. Number two, you do take a risk because there are a lot of lemons out there. You know, some of these old vintage guitars are not what they're cracked up to be. I do remember I played one or two guitars back in those days, and they weren't very good. And number 3, these reissue style guitars are a carefully blended mix of the best attributes from each of the years of early production, and so all in all, a really lovely guitar to play and to own. Are they worth the money? Well, personally, I'm not interested in any discussion as to whether a guitar or any other piece of music gear is worth the money, as it's all subjective. Of course, badly made equipment aside. In a previous video, What's with Relic Guitars, I go into that in a lot more detail and what draws different people to the various guitars out there. And I also did a video comparing 4 Stratocasters with different pickups from different eras. Check those out. I hope you've enjoyed this video and perhaps it's been helpful for some. In the next video, we do some more unboxing and something completely different, but very helpful to me. Please do subscribe, hit the bell to get notifications, like and share and so on. It's always nice to hear of others' experiences. Do check out my channel playlist, which covers my journey back to playing and recording guitar after a 40-year break. So whether you're a newcomer, an ongoing player, or like me, an old hand returning to playing guitar, I always take time to engage with folks who take time to comment. So, until next time, the journey continues. Do take care.